We'll wrap up this report on from Irina on renewables in adaptation in a couple of podcasts. Obviously, renewables have been important contribution to economic development for countries like China and India. And of course, you want to be energy independent as well, especially when you are resource poor, like India, when it comes to, let's say, natural gas or oil. Maybe they have solar and wind, and there is a lot of coal, but you don't want to burn coal, not only for mitigating climate change, but for a lot of the health impacts as well. So in that sense, renewables are a natural choice for continued economic growth. But then can you also count them in your efforts to mitigate climate change as agreed to under the Paris Agreement as nationally determined contributions? So this is a brief data on renewables-based adaptation in nationally determined contributions by region. Obviously, if you're going to do something like renewables deployment anyway, which India and China are doing quite rapidly for their own energy security and economic growth, as I mentioned, but can you then also go ahead and count it for your NDC? Why wouldn't you? Because you moving from fossil fuels, especially coal, to renewables does reduce your emissions. Obviously you would want to count it. So here are the sub-Saharan African countries, SIDS, the small island developing states, Asia, Middle East and North Africa, and Latin America. So here are the countries with NDCs, and we are looking at the number here in each region. Sub-Saharan Africa has a large number of countries with NDCs, and then countries with adaptation contributions in NDCs is the same as the total number here, but countries with renewables based adaptation solutions in NDCs is about a half of the total number of countries signed up to Paris Agreement. There are details as to why this counting is different for different regions, and you can see here for SIDS again the number of countries with renewables based adaptation solutions. So this is renewables based adaptation solutions that we have been talking about in terms of energy services and non-energy services for adaptation in different sectors like water, health, and so on. Okay, so in Asia, only about 10 countries count renewable-based adaptations in their NDCs. Lower for MENA, and Latin America is even lower, but the number of countries signed up to Paris is also lower. Just keep that in mind. Examples of countries that specify renewables as a measure of, to address the energy resilience. So you want to be resilient, not only reduce vulnerability and deal with risks, but you want to be resilient in the sense that if there is a perturbation from climate or other natural hazards, how quickly can your systems recover, right? Especially energy systems in this case. So we'll just quickly look at the countries: Burkina Faso, Cambodia, Ethiopia, Haiti, Kenya, Nauru, Nigeria, Seychelles, and UAE. And NDCs here, various statements that I'm not sure I will read all of them. Burkina Faso, diversification of energy sources, solar, wind, and biogas is included as one of the country's priority actions for adaptation. So we are talking about renewables in adaptation here specifically, okay? Let's say Kenya. While Kenya recognizes mitigation co-benefits in adaptation interventions, the country also includes renewable energy in the adaptation section of its NDC. Enhanced climate proofing of energy measures along the renewable energy supply chain is one of their, these are very brief statements from their NDC commitments. Nigeria is an oil-rich country. Remember, it's one of the big suppliers for many of the countries, including the US, which is now moved away. There's always geopolitics involved in who gets oil from where. Expansion of sustainable energy sources and decentralized transmission to reduce the vulnerability of energy infrastructure to climate impacts is listed as a part of the country's adaptation policy framework. What does UAE do? Another country in the Middle East, but not necessarily oil-rich. The United Arab Emirates is expanding clean energy-based installed capacity in order to address potential increase in power demand due to extreme temperatures. So UAE, Middle East, if you look at the trends of temperature, let's say from 1990, Middle East, Mediterranean, almost going into the Arctic, are warming very, very rapidly. Arctic, of course, has the polar amplification. So if the Middle East is warming and fossil fuel is either going to decline or it's going to be left in the ground because of climate issues, climate change, global warming targets, and so on, then these countries really need to ramp up their energy issues or energy solutions very quickly. Saudi Arabia is moving towards green hydrogen, and of course they do a lot of solar as well, so they have wind and solar potential. So UAE is a good example of how they are planning to do that. Here, examples of sectors in which renewables contribute to adaptation, and these are the countries: Angola, Antigua and Barbuda, Cambodia, and Cabo Verde, which is in the tropical Atlantic. Again, without reading too much here, we will just look at sectors and then a bit about NDCs. Sectors: forestry, disaster reduction and response, water, human health, agriculture, water, which we have already discussed in terms of renewables contributing to adaptation solutions. So read here about Angola. Angola aims to promote renewable energy to avoid deforestation. Reducing the demand for firewood is therefore an important strategy to reduce drivers of deforestation and an exhaustion of Angola's natural resources. And it pursues an integrated approach through its energy and water sector action plan and constructing flood protection barriers along major rivers. So you can see that NDCs have been worded, as we said before, nationally determined contributions, as opposed to the Kyoto Protocol. Kyoto Protocol was kind of a top-down thing, and NDCs are much more bottom-up. Of course, countries have committed under Paris Agreement. They have submitted their plans to reduce their emissions and also tracking their progress towards sustainable development goals and so on. But obviously, if it is voluntary and you have submitted a plan based on your own capabilities and desires and willingness and so on, then there is also a monitoring, verification and reporting phase needed, which is encoded in the Paris Agreement, and the MRV phase will come up soon. Monitoring, reporting and verification will come up soon. Okay. Just to read Cambodia, which is an agricultural country. Agriculture: scaled up climate resilient agriculture production through increased access to solar irrigation systems and other climate resilient practices. For water: strengthen flood resiliency capacity of communities around Lake Tonle Sap. Access to clean water, off-grid renewable energy and waste management. Sectors focus here are agriculture and water. There are many more countries here. I'm not going to read all of them. They range in their wealth in many ways. I have a knock on my door, so I'll stop. But again, the sectors covered are agriculture, disaster reduction, response, water, food, and so on. So I will leave this here, which is a relatively short, but I have to go take care of some business. Somebody is knocking on the door. Okay, see you in the next podcast.